Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, may the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace and beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So a great good morning to you, everyone. So glad you could join us. Of course, we have a few announcements. The local increase in COVID-19 variant infections has made it necessary to suspend in-person gatherings until further notice. The chapel, of course, will still be open every day for your personal use. There will be no Seva Saturday in August. Your center will be closed during August. There will be no classes and no Sunday talks except for a guest speaker, Swami, on August 7th. You will receive all the communications you need about that in this upcoming e-communications week. E-communications are, of course, our website, our Facebook page, and the e-newsletter. For those of you not receiving the e-newsletter, I just implore you to subscribe to it because it is very carefully designed to let you know what is going on here, particularly in the week following the Thursday or Friday that it comes out. So there'll be no guest speaker, no talks or classes except for that guest speaker on August 7th. Evening Arati will continue as usual in August, and the Chandi hymns will be chanted in Sanskrit and in English. Can anyone think of an announcement that might have been made, should have been made, that was not made? All right. So once again, welcome. And we'll just plunge right in. July is a month for the study of karma yoga, a spiritual path leading to the abandonment of selfishness. As a karma yogi, you practice offering your actions and their results, as well as your perceptions, thoughts, and feelings to the Divine Presence. In many Ramakrishna Mission centers, this prayer is chanted by the congregation in unison at the end of a worship service. There's a homa fire, and during that homa fire, this is chanted by the congregation. No matter what I may have done, said, or thought, in waking, dreaming, or dreamless sleep, with my mind, my tongue, my hands, or my other members, may all that be an offering to the Divine Presence. So this is karma yoga in action. Even before fully knowing this divine presence. As a karma yogi, you hold firmly to the belief that the presence is within each person or other living being that you interact with or serve. Working and abiding in this spirit, you are increasingly able to release attachment to your activities and their results. This yields the freedom and contentment promised by karma yoga. Sri Krishna makes this promise. Even a little practice of this yoga will save you from the terrible wheel of rebirth and death. That's in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. Our caveat: nothing that will be said this morning is meant as personal instruction for you. That's not the role from here. We talk about the practices and principles of the 4 yogas and other things, but in the sense that it is offered to you as information for your use. You may take it or leave it as you see fit. There is no dogma. There is no musts. Though I may say, in the context of these talking this morning, I may say, you must do such and such. You must do such and such to achieve such a result. Whether you wish to receive or achieve that result is strictly up to you, and therefore the must or should is optional to you. So please do not take this personally. Do not react to it as if you are being personally told what to do. So this morning, we're going to talk about the 3 gunas. This is part 2 of the talk that was given last Sunday about the 3 gunas and Sankhya. We'll review some of that this morning, but we'll add to it significantly about the 3 gunas themselves. Why concern yourself about the 3 gunas? Because if we are to believe what is said in the scriptures, the reason to concern ourselves about the 3 gunas is because your misunderstanding of them is part of what Sri Krishna calls your basic delusion about yourself, that you are the doer. Krishna points out in Bhagavad Gita, though it seems that you are doing things and thinking thoughts, it is in fact the 3 gunas. He says that when you gain insight into the operations and functions of the 3 gunas, which are sattva, rajas, and tamas, you will be free of all attachment. When you gain insight into their operations and functions, you will be free of all attachment and therefore free of suffering, which is the result of attachment of various kinds. Now, for those of you who know Alcoholics Anonymous, you know that this freedom is written about in the 9th step promises. Alcoholics Anonymous has a 12-step process. Their 9th step has this as the promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. What is this that they could not do for themselves? These are steps 1 through 9, as just the listing of the steps as given by Alcoholics Anonymous. Now listen to this in the context of karma yoga, of yourself abandoning selfishness and surrendering to the idea that it is God who is doing things for you. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. That's step 2. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. That's step 6. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. We humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. We made a list. This is step 8 now. This is preparatory to step 9. We made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. We made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. We made direct amends. This is step 9 now. We made direct amends to such people whenever possible, wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. This is karma yoga in action and practice, the great applied spirituality of Alcoholics Anonymous and its 12-step program. Sri Ramakrishna said, God alone is the doer. Everything happens by His will. God alone is the doer. Everything happens by His will. The Master insisted the actions that you take and the thoughts you think are not your own. They are, in fact, God's thoughts and actions expressed by the Gunas. This morning we will define and discuss the Gunas, their source, and their effects. What is the source of the Gunas? According to both the scriptures of virtually all the traditions, but we'll talk about the Vedas. According to the Vedas and according to modern physics, there are 2 states of universe, the unmanifest and the manifest. The unmanifest is characterized, according to Swami Vivekananda, by the three gunas being in their potential form in perfect equilibrium. In perfect equilibrium. So there is no force, no activity, no action of any kind. This is the attributeless state of Brahman. Nothing, no thing. It cannot really be thought about. But Vivekananda tells us that in that state, and of course he derives this from the Upanishads, that in that state of being, the gunas are in perfect equilibrium. Then the thought arises in the cosmic mind, and this is the dawn of the day of manifestation, or as it is called in the Vedas, the day of Brahma. The thought arises in the cosmic mind, I am one, I shall body myself forth as many. This is said in the Chandogya Upanishad. This instantly, so to speak, takes the gunas from a state of equilibrium to disequilibrium. And they begin to create in the subtle realm all manner of subtle essences and combinations of those essences. But Vivekananda says one of the aspects of this is that no sooner than they have done this, than they realize that it has a discomfort as well as joy. And so, in part, they begin to yearn for a return to equilibrium. This is mumukshutvam. This is the yearning for freedom and happiness that expresses itself as our spiritual practice. So they are in the unmanifest state. The gunas are not really manifest at all. They are just potential, but they are in perfect equilibrium. Then they become disequilibrated, so to speak, and everything begins. So what are the gunas? Within time, space, and causation, they appear to us to be inertia, tamas, electricity, rajas, and gravity, sattva. Inertia, tamas, electricity, rajas, and gravity, sattva. This is, according to John Dobson's formulation, the great astrophysicist and Vedic philosopher John Dobson. Inertia. Within universe, without inertia, there is no manifestation. The so-called Higgs field, the Higgs boson field, gives mass to those things that arise in universe. One of the characteristics of those things having mass is a body at rest, a mass at rest, will remain at rest until acted on by some force. So that force is defined as electricity. Now, there is electricity at the heart of every atom. There is that electrical charge that is drawing the particles to the nucleus of the atom and the, the attraction of the electrical charge of the particles themselves, and then that aspect of inertia that represents itself as centrifugal and centripetal force that keeps them apart, so that now there is, where there was no thing, there is now something. And then gravity, sattva. Gravity is the tendency of things to attract one another by their very nature, by their very mass. And so the primordial hydrogen atoms attracted one another and gathered in great clouds, fell together, became denser and denser, and became stars, and so on. That's the physics way of thinking about these three gunas and how we get something out of what was apparently nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was these forces of the gunas, but now it has these aspects as things. According to Sankhya philosophy, the source of all reality and experiences is known as prakriti, nature in its true, pure, original form. In its unmanifest it is the unmanifest primal resource, the sum total of the universal energy. So this is what Prakriti is in its unmanifest form. Prakriti is without a cause, yet it is the cause and source of all effects, the ultimate basis of the empirical universe. So Prakriti. Now, as we'll see, there is no difference between Prakriti and the gunas. Through a process of continuous evolution over many billions of years, Prakriti, as the three gunas, manifests its latent potential and effects into various forms, energies, and elements. And as I said, by definition, Prakriti and the three gunas are identical. Gunas are the very nature of this primal force and its expression. It's just two ways of talking about the same thing. This creative process first evolves 24 cosmic principles. Before we go into our quick review of those 24 cosmic principles that Sankhya philosophy says that Prakriti evolves itself into, are there any comments from your own wisdom or experience to add to this, or any concern or question that this raises? All right, good. So the first of these 24 cosmic principles is Mahat. This is that cosmic thought, that thought in the cosmic mind. Mahat, the great cause. And it becomes Prakriti in its dynamic aspect. From its potential aspect to its dynamic aspect, it is called Mahat. The second of the cosmic principles is Buddhi, the ability to discriminate, reason, and it is the causative or creative intelligence. So the cosmic mind has created. Now it says, this is this, that is that, and this is what will happen as a causative or creative result. The third of the cosmic principles is ahamkara, the ego principle. Now, there is only one ego. There is only one I am, that is discriminating, reasoning, and causing. And as Krishna points out, it is our misunderstanding of this that causes us to think that we are, each of us is a separate being, doing, creating, and causing, and discriminating, reasoning, and so on, thinking. It is our fundamental delusion. In fact, we are the Atman. We'll get to that. The fourth of the cosmic principles is the mind, or sixth sense, which is, in its pure form, simply a recording attribute, recording what happens. This is this, that is that. It wasn't meant to be as dominant as it has become. At least we can say it wasn't meant to be that as we understand it. Perhaps what meaning is more elusive to us than that. So the fifth through the ninth cosmic principles are the five sense organs. Now, this first, it's in the subtle sense, it becomes gross. But the five sense organs are the eyes, nose, ears, tongue, and skin. I read that poorly. So the five sense organs are eyes, nose, ears, tongue, and skin. All right, now 10 through 14, the five organs of action: mouth, feet, hands, organs of excretion, and of procreation. Cosmic principles 15 through 19, the five subtle elements of which everything becomes manifest: sound, touch, smell, form or color, and taste. You can see these are related to the five organs of perception, the five subtle elements: sound, touch, smell, form or color, and taste. 20 through 24, now we've come to what we register, what we know as our everyday experience. The five gross elements: earth, water, air, fire, and ether. These 24 cosmic principles are continually creating and evolving as the three gunas: sattva, the revealing power, gravity; rajas, the projecting power, electricity; and tamas, the concealing power, or inertia. Now, these three things, we have the physical definition, and then we have the spiritual or inner meaning: the revealing power of sattva, the projecting power of rajas, and the concealing power of tamas. Now, having defined the 24 cosmic principles, again, is there any comment from anyone, or any concern or question? Anything that isn't clear?
I have a question, but I feel like it's more...
Or anything that you would like to help make more clear?
Am I audible? Hello?
So these 24 cosmic principles, in innumerable combinations, innumerable combinations
So
are
somebody,
the source
Shankara?
and energies
can you hear us?
of continuous evolution that give rise to manas and its projections. We,
Shankara?
by our ability to recognize things as recorded in the mind,
You can't hear us.
we project the reality that we experience. I'm in class, can't talk.
You.
Say it again.
No one can hear you. No one can hear you because you must have your sound completely off. You can't hear. I mean, sorry, everybody can hear you, but you can't hear anybody else. You need to unmute your sound so you can hear people when they're talking to you. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, dear. Thank you. Well, my sound is unmuted.
Can you
I
hear?
don't.
They're not your mic. Your speakers on it's on your keyboard.
Right, I got it. Okay.
Can people?
Yeah, now I did that.
Sorry.
So now can you hear us?
Say something.
Yes, now I can hear people. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Bye.
Thank goodness for electronics. Tom Carr, you wanted to say something.
Well, I was trying to tell you that somebody else wanted to say something, but since I'm on, I have a question. So how do you use the concept of the three gunas in your life, to make your life better in some way?
Well, we talked about the 9 steps in AA. This is a very deliberate use of the energies of the 3 gunas and their recognition that it is God as these energies that is doing everything, and we surrender ourselves to that. But we'll go into that a little bit more as we finish up, Tom, what it means to actually live these in practice. But thank you for that question. But just think about those 9 steps and the 9th step promises, and you see these 3 gunas in action because God and the 3 gunas, as was said, God as Prakriti, or Saguna Brahman, as we'll call it, Saguna Atman, in a few moments. These are what is actually operating, not our, and so when we surrender ourselves to that as a way of being, then things, according to the 9th step promises and according to the promises of Sri Krishna and the Upanishads and so on, life becomes very different for us and far less self-centered, which is the whole point of karma yoga, the abandonment of selfishness. So thank you for the question, Tom.
Thank you.
Brother, I have a comment to make. Sometimes when I, in the morning, it's a very simple thing, but in the morning when I find it difficult to wake up, it's laziness, and I tell myself, almost mentally, almost shout to myself, shake up the tamas and wake up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, it is a good thing to remind ourselves. And of course, this is according to what we understand from Sri Krishna and from Sri Ramakrishna and the Upanishads. This is the very voice of God saying, arise, awake, get up and be doing. So you think it's your voice.
Mm-hmm.
It is in fact the voice of the divine. So thank you, Rajiv, and that is a good reminder.
Thank you, brother.
Shankara, if I may, as a multi-decadal 12-stepper, for the first time ever, when you were reading the first step, I replaced alcohol with Maya, and the rest of it was as if I had never heard the 9 steps before, because I made that substitution. If I didn't know there were other people on this call, I would think you were talking directly to me with everything that you've said. So thank you for your clarity. And you and I have talked about how Swamiji influenced the Oxford group that became AA, as well as Bill W.'s participation in the Hollywood monastery.
Yes,
And,
and Trabuco, yes.
Yes. And yeah, I'm vibrating at such a high level. I should just go ahead and shut up right now. I'm going to mute myself. Thank you.
All right. Well, let that vibration just flow through you. It is the transformative power, that feeling of high vibration. It is the transformative power. Thank you, Amadas. Anyone else? Anything?
Well, I'm just thinking out loud, but in answer to what Tom was saying about how do we use these to better our lives, and I think the three gunas are also tools to be used to track our progress and the nature of our thoughts. So I think that they're tools for the discriminatory process. You know, is this a tamasic thought? Is this a rajasic thought? Is this a sattvic thought or experience? And then hopefully over time we will start to see our, you know, the sattva rising and the rajas and tamas decreasing. So I think they're also tools. Maybe that's just a thought I had.
The only question is whose tools, and they are the tools of the Atman. That is the voice of God that is saying, this is this, this is that, this is the other. There is only one buddhi. So you're absolutely right. That is what happens, and it is the classification. This is this, this is that, this is the other thing. And over time, emphasizing the one within ourselves and de-emphasizing the others, that gives rise to the truth of those 9 steps and the 9th step promises. So anything else from anyone? Thank you, Justine.
Brother?
Yes, dear.
Niranjana?
Yes, Niranjana.
Brother, I think the first cosmic principle you had mentioned something that said the great cause. Is this the same as the thought that I am one, I shall become many? Is that the great cause, or are they two
Yes,
different things?
that is the great cause. That is the genesis of the great cause. The great cause then takes what was potential and makes it dynamic. And so the great cause then begins to manifest itself in these other cosmic principles and the reality that we know, the universe that we experience, time, space, and causation, with its negative as well as positive aspects. So yes, great cause and that thought in the cosmic mind are one and the same thing. That is the Mahat.
But Mahat isn't the same as Brahman, right?
No, Mahat is not the same as Brahman. Brahman, it cannot be said to think anything or do anything. So what is thinking and acting? As Sri Ramakrishna says, it is Shakti. Another name for Shakti is Prakriti. It is within this, as the Vedas tell us, that something beyond no thing, an unmanifest state beyond no thing. And Sri Ramakrishna says they are identical, water still and water in waves, same water. It seems to be separated by our experience of the dynamic aspect and our ignorance of the potential aspect or the unmanifest aspect. But as we become more and more aware of the Atman, as we'll discuss as we go on, that's when we become aware that the Atman in its active or dynamic or saguna phase with the gunas is what's doing everything. And the truth of our being is the witness of all this. Does that make sense, Narendra?
I'm a little bit confused that because Brahman and Shakti are two ways of expressing the same thing. That's what Guru Maharaj has said. But is Shakti same as Prakriti?
Yes, precisely. Shakti, Gunas, Prakriti, all the same. Maya is another name. Kali is another name. They're just all ways of trying to gesture, pointing at the moon. So pointing at the moon is not the moon itself. So, but we can point at the moon and thereby focus our attention on the moon. That's what we're doing when we use these words, is focusing our attention. As we focus our attention more and more through spiritual practice, the meaning, the deep understanding of these things comes to us. This confusion is so understandable, Narendra. As Saint Teresa of Avila said, it is only in us, human beings, it is only in us that God becomes so confused that he asks questions.
Mhm.
This was her direct insight.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, Uma.
one question.
Yes, dear.
I know we are going to discuss the way gunas operate in a human life.
Yes.
But I am also wondering how actually these three gunas operate in the world of nature. Prakriti, acting on Prakriti itself. For example, I'm thinking that when storms and tornadoes and all these kind of disturbances or disequilibrium happens in the world of nature, then we can say, oh, nature has gone berserk or wild, and it is out of its elements. So these kind of tamas, rajas, and inertia, that also affects the world of nature, doesn't it?
Yes. And to say that nature has gone wild and is out of its elements is simply a self-contradicting thought. Nature cannot be outside of its own elements. This is simply an expression that we find unpleasant and destructive. And so we don't like that destructive aspect.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like it. So we judge it and we say there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong, though it has effects that are unpleasant and destructive and very sorrowful and harmful to human beings. There's nothing wrong.
So is it natural for
Perfectly. As anyone who studies the physics of weather will tell you, it is perfectly natural. There is nothing unusual about it at all. Now, of course, because of things that have happened over the last many decades, probably the last 100 years, we're experiencing more violent weather patterns. But again, this is perfectly natural. It's simply a consequence of our acting ignorantly.
or irresponsible?
Say it again.
Warming trend and ice.
Yes, all these things are happening, and it's only just begun.
Mm.
We're in the middle of the beginning.
So is it man-caused or is it nature?
What does it mean to say man-caused?
Like
No. I understand your question, Uma. But what does it mean to say man-caused? There is no such thing as man-caused. There is only God's doing. And to say that God can act ignorantly, it is only in us that God becomes so confused that he asks questions. And so Saguna Atman has its negative aspect within time, space, and causation, as well as its positive aspect. There is no such thing as universe without ignorance. And so things happen out of that ignorance. And this ignorance was caused by the divine presence itself. There is no other explanation. As Vivekananda said, there can be only one existence, only one. There cannot be two. And as Swami Yogeshananda put it, consciousness is primary and is not plural. And everything happens as an expression of that consciousness, capital C. And its subset, consciousness, small c.
What I was thinking of, Swamiji,
Hmm?
our polluting the air or creating too much of carbon dioxide and through our use of petroleum.
Yes, yes, all that's true, dear. But what each of us can react to that in our appropriate ways. But there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. Each individual, we can do our tiny little bit. But so, since it's beyond our control, let's not give it any thought. Let's not give it any time. We do what we can, and we go on our way. As Jesus Christ said, become passers-by.
It seems like there's an assumption that we are separate from nature to say that we would impact, to say that something from human, involvement would be unnatural.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It is not unnatural. It is perfectly natural. And so it is a natural consequence of those actions that we can say are done in ignorance that produce these devastating effects. Let us not spend too much time concerning ourselves about them.
Ignorance is tamas, isn't it?
No. Ignorance is Maya.
Maya.
Tamas, we mustn't say that tamas is bad and wrong. We must not. Tamas is simply a fact. It has its positive and its negative aspects. There is no such thing as a lever without a fulcrum. And so the inertia of what the fulcrum rests on is necessary for the action of the lever, of the fulcrum. So these things are not inherently this or that. They are just a fact. They are just an explanation, the Sankhya explanation for why and how everything happens.
Brother, the way I thought about it is that if the Divine Mother is creating sattva, rajas, and tamas, how can she create something inauspicious? It is we who cannot understand, or we who cannot deal with these powers and things that makes it inauspicious.
Well, precisely. How can there be anything inauspicious in the creation of the divine? And even our experience of what we call inauspicious. So, as Vivekananda said, this is a gymnasium. We're living in a gymnasium. We learn to overcome inauspiciousness by the practice of auspiciousness. And so, but you're absolutely right. There can be nothing unnatural in what the mother has done. The mother being the divine feminine as expressed as Prakriti or Shakti or Maya. Anything else from anyone? All right, dears. In innumerable combinations, the three gunas are the source and energies of continuous evolution that give rise to the manas, the mind, and its projections, the organs of perception and action, and the subtle and gross elements. You witness all this as Saguna Atman. According to Karma Yoga, the path of action. You witness all this as Saguna Atman. According to Karma Yoga, the path of action. How do you, as that Atman, gain insight into the operations and functions of the gunas? So I'm going to read that again. In innumerable combinations, and this is detailed in great, Sankhya means counting or enumeration. Just as the periodic table of chemistry lists how all of what we perceive as the elements, as we call them, come to be and exist. So in Sankhya, there is this extremely detailed, so much of tamas, so much of rajas, so much of sattva produces this. And they deal in minute amounts, just as our modern chemistry does. Minute amounts. It takes years to understand what Sankhya actually means by how these things are created. But in innumerable combinations, these three gunas are the source and energies of continuous evolution that give rise to the mind, manas, and its projections. Everything we know is a projection of the mind. Its knowledge of name and form allows us to project the relative universe that we experience, which is exactly the deep secret behind that rope snake superimposition that Adi Shankaracharya speaks of. We project the snake not because we have to, but because we want to. We could see the reality of the rope, but we don't. We project the reality of the snake, the relative reality of the snake, because we want to, as Saguna Atman. So, in all these combinations, the gunas give rise to manas, the mind, and its projections, the organs of perception and action, and the subtle and gross elements. And the subtle and gross elements. The subtle elements become known to anyone who studies them, anyone who is an artist, anyone who is a philosopher, anyone who is a scientist, any of these people who study things because they want to deeply, comes in contact with the subtle elements, that which lies behind the gross elements. So the subtle elements, it isn't that they can't be known to us, and they become known to us very, very thoroughly when we practice contemplation, concentration, and meditation. We see as the witness, as we become more and more expert at being and abiding as the witness, we see how the subtle becomes the gross. We see this. And so this is why scientists and artists and philosophers then can express this in words and the various forms of art and science. What is this witness? You witness all this as saguna Atman, Atman with attributes, just as it is called Shakti or Kali or Maya or Prakriti. Another name for it is Saguna Atman, the Atman in its dynamic aspects, with attributes and desires and intentions. It is volition itself. According to Karma Yoga, the path of action, how do you, as that Atman, gain insight into the operations and functions of the gunas? I'm going to give you two summary statements by great swamis, both of them known to me, so this is not hearsay. They both said this, and I was part of the audience hearing this. As a matter of fact, in both cases, they actually said it to me personally, but I was also part of a group that heard them say this. So this is not hearsay. This isn't not something written in a book. This is the experience of Swami Sridharananda saying, how do you do this? How do you know the functions and operations of the gunas? He says, divinize your life. Make of your life a continuous, unbroken interaction with the divine. Now, that is exactly what the 9 steps that were summarized earlier are talking about. Making your life a continuous, unbroken interaction with the divine and turning your life over to that divine presence and saying, not I, but thou. Take my hand. Pull me on. Draw me near. Seat me by thy fire. So then you understand. This becomes this continuous, unbroken interaction with the divine. Swami Prabhavananda, whatever you do, and this second, it's repeated with emphasis because that's the way he said it. Whatever you do, give it a Godward turn. So think of everything in terms of God. Every thought, every experience, every feeling, every attachment, everything negative, everything positive. Nothing is wrong. It is all the God in this context as the 3 gunas, doing, thinking, feeling, acting. So see it in those terms, everything, whatever you do, whatever you think, whatever you feel, whatever you are. This is what the Swami means by do. Whatever you do, give it a Godward turn. See it in terms of God and the actions of God as the doer, the thinker, the actor. And as you do this over time, what happens according to Swami Sridharananda is you start off with this idea, this self-centered idea, quite naturally, quite appropriately, auspiciously. You start off with this self-centered idea, I am. Then something will happen to you. This was talked about in that talk, Spark of Reverence. Something happens to you that gives you an insight into there's something beyond. There's something beyond. What is it? What is it? And so you then have I am and thou art. This thou art is simply a way of summarizing what that is. Over time, as you divinize your life, as you give everything a Godward turn, you begin to understand, oh, thou art, and therefore I am. And ultimately, this is that thou art, and therefore I am, is savikalpa samadhi. Then ultimately there comes full realization, which, as Patanjali says, is not something you can will or do. It is something that happens to you. You become, it's expressed. It isn't as if this is the truth of what it is, but the realization is, thou alone art. Thou art. Thou art the doer, thou art the thinker, thou art the actor. So that's the three gunas and their expression as the life we know and live. Any comments from anyone, from your own wisdom, from your own experience, any concern that this raises, any question you'd like to ask?
Brother, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha in Ayurveda is also very interesting. It's like Kapha is tamas, and I mean, it's not exactly that, but
Yes, Ayurveda has its interpretation of all this and how it should be with us in being healthy and mentally stable and so on. It's Ayurveda, as Sri Ramakrishna said, though, the Ayurveda way, the traditional ways, the ways of the Kavirajas. He says, there's no time for that now. Human life is too short. We need Dr. Gupta's mixture.
but brother, Ayurveda as a there's a philosophical aspect of Ayurveda. Like wherever you see, like your own mind, even physical objects, these things apply in so many different places apart from just medicine. And it's
Yes, of course, Rajiv. There is nothing within Indian philosophy and practice that doesn't have a philosophical component behind it. They simply don't believe in anything unless it has this philosophical component behind it.
and one of the
So,
things you
but
mentioned is
does that mean, Rajiv, that we should study Ayurveda? Well, you make up your own mind about what you want to study. It is not what is recommended by the lineage that is represented from here.
got you. But the
So,
reason I was bringing this up is, like you mentioned, that going from gross to subtle, and I was thinking about it, and I realized that some of these basic frameworks sort of help you, like Prakriti and Purusha, or and then even this Sattva, Tamas, and all these basic frameworks. If you see, like the entire world is filled of anything that you see in manifestation follow some of these basic patterns. And if you compare things, like for example, what I do is I take the Panch Tattva and any, like for example, aspects of the mind or anything that you want to study, you just break it down by comparing it with Panch Tattva, and you can get a lot of like tremendous insights out of that.
no question about it, dear. You have a knack of exploring things in this intellectual way that gives you a lot of satisfaction. It is not what is recommended by the lineage that is represented from here. They recommend a much simpler way, and it's represented by the 4 yogas as taught by Swami Vivekananda. And so even the philosophical aspect of it is one of neti, not exploring the things of the mind, but setting aside the mirror of the mind. So this is, though the Swami explains things in great detail, he then says, take all this, set it aside, and essentially he also says, divinize your life. So I'm not arguing with you, Rajiv. I'm just simply saying these are not the principles and practices as represented by what's sitting here.
Brother
Makes
Shankar,
sense.
Anything else from anyone?
Brother Shankar,
Yes, Bhagirath.
as I was thinking, even three gunas or panchatattva, like Rajiv was saying, they are not single monomorphic entities. They themselves are made up of multiple portions. And that is the reason why an intellectual approach is ultimately going to be more frustrating. And your general highway that go through the divine pathway is perhaps not only simplistic, but more effective also. Because the gunas are constantly changing. One whom we call sattva guna is not going to be same sattva all the time.
No, of course not.
Nothing
No.
is constant but the change. So the
Yes.
change is always taking place. But the only thing is, when you try to break down on an intellectual way, there is a point up to which you can go and then no more beyond.
Yes.
That comes no more beyond, then what do? You say the things are bad, or just live entirely to God or whatever you believe in, and see the magnitude of the life that surrounds us. And therefore, I think, to study something is wonderful for life, but really speaking, what we need is to observe, not study.
Yes, observe and let that observation become very deep.
Yes.
Look. This is what's meant by contemplation, concentration, and meditation. It's not cogitation or mentation. Yes, there is the necessity for manana, but manana as contemplation. What is it that I need to know more deeply to penetrate the mystery of the gunas, the mystery of the superficial? So absolutely, you're right, Bhagirath. Thank you. Anything else from anyone?
Shankara,
Yes, dear, Lori.
could you please talk some about Purusha?
Well, Purusha Purusha is Brahman, as Swami Prabhavananda said, that Purusha, Brahman, Shiva, all these names for the motionless, the actionless, the attributeless. Really, nothing can be said about them, other than that is the ground of. This is Meister Eckhart's term. That is the ground of being. That is the ground of being. But what does that mean? It can only be known through realization. We do not know anything about Purusha or Brahman, or for that matter, Shiva in the sense that we're talking about now, except as realization. So there's not, but I can just say that Purusha and Brahman are gestures at the same, and it is even mistaken to say state of being, because there is no, they don't exist. They are existence itself, it is said. They don't know, they are knowledge itself. They don't love or are blissful, they are bliss or love itself. So everything that we see, this is why that verse from the Gita says, one who sees Brahman in every action attains to Brahman. So everything that partakes of existence is in fact Purusha or Brahman. But it isn't Brahman. It's, this is where language absolutely fails us, dear. You can't really say anything about Purusha or Brahman except these clumsy attempts that I've just made. And they are clumsy, naturally, and quite, there just isn't any other way. Even Vivekananda, in his inspired talks, says there's no real way of talking about this, just realize it, just insist upon it. And he really practices in those talks. He practices satyagraha. Just insist that that's what you are. And not any of this, what he refers to in various ways, including the word nonsense. He doesn't mean nonsense as a pejorative. He means it in its actual meaning. It does not make sense and cannot by its very nature. So does that get it a little bit, Lori?
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry I can't be more definitive, but that's, the one term, Purusha and Brahman, Saguna or Nirguna Brahman, Shiva and the sense that we see Kali standing on his chest, these are all just gestures at something that cannot be held by the finite mind. Speech cannot hold thee nor mind, yet without thee we think not nor speak.
Brother Shankar?
Yes, Bhagirath.
The same thing is illustrated in a mythological story where Vishnu and Brahma, they are passing through the woods and they see a small flame. So they say, let us measure the size of the flame. The flame started enlarging. So Brahma says, I'll go on the top of the flame, and Vishnu, you go to the bottom of the flame, and let us measure how big is the flame. They went on endlessly searching, and ultimately they say, no, we cannot reach the top, we cannot reach the bottom, and therefore they bow down to Shiva, and that is how the truth was revealed to them. So basically, sometimes it's not only we are finite, but the unfortunate thing is we think we are infinite.
Yes, well, the jiva thinks that way.
Jiva thinks that way, and that's where we go wrong.
Yeah.
For example, 5 elements. Rajiv said, beautiful, those 5 Panchamahabhuta. Out of that, let us take only one, the earth. The earth has so many things inside the womb of the earth. How can you put earth as a single entity?
No.
That is why it is called Vasundhara, the one which holds multiple wealth, not one.
Yes.
To recognize that, to me, is Vedanta. So
And
Vedanta is a special kind of a science which does not limit your way of thinking, but makes it unlimited, and thereby you find out that you are limited.
yes. And this is the earth and all associated with it is the karma bhumi.
Yes.
It is the realm of action. And this is why Sri Krishna in Gita discourages us from thinking about it, reasoning about it, but act, do this, do that. And then understanding will dawn. These are his instructions to the every person that is Arjuna. Arjuna is the every person, the student that we all are. And these are in chapter 17. These are the instructions to Arjuna, that this is the field of action. The very body we live in a very stardust spacesuit is the field of action. And so the endless analysis of things, which we do naturally. It's as natural to us as breathing, but ultimately we have to take care. We'll end up being, as Muhammad said, a donkey carrying a load of books. And so,
Can I add something? Oh,
please,
sometimes we just are tired of acting.
yes.
And that's a double meaning there on the acting. And I just want to tell a story real quick. I don't see her on here, but I saw one of our people the other day, and I was having a day. I was overwhelmed, and I said, I just want to turn into a little bird and fly away. And she said, sit down and tell me, where would you go? And I sat down, and all that came to my mind were exploring beautiful, natural, remote places on the earth. But then I thought about it some more when I got home, and I thought, you know, where I want to be is somewhere quiet and beautiful and safe. And I said to myself, the only place I can truly find that is inside, not out. I can't find that outside.
No.
There isn't any place outside. And I said to myself, that's an important thing to remember, Cindy.
Yes, very well said, dear. Yes, well, this is what we're told over and over and over. If you keep looking outside, you ultimately will be frustrated. Bhagirath pointed that out earlier. If you keep looking outside, no matter how delightful and complex and absorbing the outside can be, it is not it doesn't have the characteristics that you care. The only place you find that is within. And that's because that is the seat of our true being, our Atman. And and the Atman is all of those things that you mentioned. And if you want to know what's meant by that, just read chapter 2 of the Gita. I mean, Krishna just spells it out in absolute. It is invulnerable in every sense of the word. Cannot be cut by a sword, cannot be burnt by a fire, cannot be dried by wind. It is invulnerable. It is safe in the most profound sense of that word.
Or as the song goes, can't touch this.
No, cannot touch this.
In context with what Cindy said, if you want to be a bird, you have a choice, like the two birds in our Upanishad. Do you want to be that constantly acting, frustrated bird, or a quietly sitting, observing bird?
Well, what is the ultimate secret of that Upanishad story? That they are one and the same.
Exactly. Oh, yes.
That the one is the shadow of the other.
Yes.
So that's what it was meant earlier when I said the word reflection.
One is a witness. One witness is the other.
Yes. But the witness is its own shadow moving.
Yeah.
As the sun of creation, as the sun moves or appears to move through the sky, the shadow appears to move. Anything else from anyone? Thank you, dears.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
I also wanted to share, after listening to Cindy and her using the word that sometimes we get tired of acting. This is a personal sort of story, and I hope it's not too convoluted, but I will get to the point, hopefully not too long, about how the spiritual process is helping me to cope. basically, I've lost 3 family members, my mother-in-law in March, and then 2, my oldest and the second oldest sibling, one in April and one just about a week ago.
Oh,
And
my.
all 3 were karma yogis. My mother-in-law was a teacher, my older sister was a scientist, and the one that just passed away was a physician who worked until she was like 78, and she passed away at 82. My mother-in-law, of course, had Alzheimer's, so we couldn't quite figure out everything, but we often heard her saying that, I want to go, I want to go, I want. And the 2 sisters, also towards the end, became very quiet. I mean, they were very active in their lives, doing a lot, creating, sharing, and but towards the end, they became very giving. They would call if somebody wanted, and but not no conflict with the world. And I could sort of detect that they were ready to go. And indeed, they both passed away. One at home peacefully, and the other one in the hospital, but also sort of peacefully. So the message is that they were karma yogis, and they, I guess, like you said, doing, creating, and sharing is why we are here. And they were doing all of that, the creating, the acting, and the sharing, but I think they got tired of being. So maybe in their own way, they prayed and different mumukshutvam, and God has helped them onwards in their journey. So that's what I feel.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that very intimate story. Yes, this is, if we look closely, and there are some real sophisticated studies being published these days about what emergency room, ICU, and hospice personnel witness and see as people are transitioning from being within the body to outside the body. It's truly remarkable what they're seeing, because they're doing it. Some of these are quite scientific in their approach, and so is to create results that are reviewable and unassailable. So it's, and then of course there's always Pim van Lommel's book, Consciousness Beyond Life, and this great study that he did, very scientifically. He is a scientist, and proving that what we seem to be as embodied beings is just the very suggestion of what it is that's behind.
The most phenomenal place is ICU, which I say ICSEEUYOU.
All right.
At that end point, if you can say I see you, that means perhaps you got the best out of the life that God had entrusted you with.
Thank you, Bhagarat. Lovely pun.
That
Indeed,
brings up.
sorry, I just wanted to say that after listening to Bhagirathji's comment, indeed, the sister who just passed away did pass away in the ICU.
Good.
So someone else?
Yeah, that reminded me. I just read a fascinating book is by Brian Weiss called One Life, Many Bodies. And a woman in the ICU, she was out cold, yet she saw everything that happened down to the last detail and was able to recall it to the doctors, including him dropping his gold pen and chasing it under a desk. So that was pretty amazing out-of-body experience. She was blind too, and she saw this, and he was kind of freaked out by this because he didn't believe in any of that stuff.
Well, this is where Pim van Lommel started, a very similar experience of a patient relating to him everything that happened in the operating room before his spirit left the operating room. But there was no possible way that this clinically dead person could have known all those things.
Yeah.
So this is where Pim van Lommel got started on his research. He also did not believe in these things until confronted with this particular patient who survived, but
But then came back to tell about and recall this
Yeah.
amazing experience.
yeah.
And there's another thing in the book that I wanted to get your thoughts on as a Vedantist. I'm quoting from the book now. Progression in the areas of contemplation and meditation is important, but those who seclusion should understand that we are a social species, and those who do not experience the joys of the physical, the pleasures of the senses, aren't learning the full lesson this present life has to teach them. What's the Vedanta perspective on someone saying something like that?
What does Krishna say in
Mhm.
chapters 5 and 6 of the Gita? Enjoy. Sri Ramakrishna said, "You've come to the mango grove, eat the mangoes." But both of them say, then offer everything, the thing that you are experiencing, your experience of it, what you take away from it, offer it all to me, because it is in fact mine.
Got it. Because we tend to think that being spiritual means leading an ascetic life, but that's may not necessarily be.
How can you tell this to someone who's leading a householder's life? I mean, those who take monastic vows, they may separate themselves from the world to some degree. Does this mean that they don't enjoy a meal or enjoy a movie or no? But you certainly can't say this to someone leading a householder's life. Oh, you must not enjoy anything. This is that kind of terrible fundamentalism that creeps over each tradition in one way or another. If you study the way the Baal Shem Tov established the Hasidic tradition and see the joy and enjoyment and appreciation and love of God that is in that, and then you see what it has become. Not to condemn them. I mean, it's not my business to condemn them, but they have definitely made it something entirely different, very narrow and very rigid. And at least that's how it looks on the outside. So it isn't that we are to not enjoy things. That's not the point. But just keep your priorities straight.
Mhm.
Thank you, Brahmadas. That's a good
That's good advice.
15 minutes of Spike Jones and 45 minutes of the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, Justine is remarking on the fact that she and I listened to some Spike Jones yesterday on YouTube. Spike Jones is a 17-minute recapitulation in the inimitable Spike Jones way of the opera Carmen. And it is just hilarious. Don Escapillo. And what was the other guy's name? The other suitor, I can't remember his name. Anyway, it's just hilarious. Is there any reason not to enjoy that? No, he created it to be enjoyed, and we should enjoy the living daylights out of it.
That's
anything else from anyone, dear? All right. We all have this to take into ourselves, this closing chant. Let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let this infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us, and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. So until next week, when we'll have an open forum on Karma Yoga, and there will be a worksheet posted in the newsletter online and on Facebook, a worksheet that you can download. It'll also be available to you for download on Zoom that morning. It's just a PDF of a worksheet about, what is Karma Yoga and what are we talking about when we do an open forum on it. It's not meant to be notes for a talk. It's just a definition of Karma Yoga. So that's what we'll do next Sunday. And as I said, on the first Sunday of August, we have a guest speaker, a Swami, that is being brought to us by some devotees. Of course, that'll be on Zoom, not in person. But that Swami will be our guest speaker on August 7th, and that will be the only talk in August. For the rest of this week, our classes will go forward as usual. Monday night, the reading and discussion group of the book Love Poems from God. The Tuesday evening gathering for the reading and discussion of the book Sri Sharada Devi, her divine play about Holy Mother Sri Sharada Devi. And then on Wednesday, we're getting well along, but no reason you shouldn't join us for the reading and discussion of Swami Ranganathananda's Divine Grace. And then on Saturday at noon, the last class on this for until September, How to Know God by Swami Prabhupada. Any final thought or comment or question from anyone? All right, dears, so delightful to have been with you. These congregations are sustaining and joyous because so much is offered. Whether you speak up or not is not of consequence. The current of your being, there being only one of us, however it seems. So you are there even if we don't hear from you with our ears. So until next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, dears. And sayonara.